I'm actually going to turn my video off so that I'm not a distraction to you. And then we can go ahead and hear all about the free websites that are available for doing research in Canada. We're going to start with the Library and Archives Canada, which is our national archives. It is based in Ottawa. Everybody seems to think that Toronto is the capital of the universe. Toronto is the capital of the province of Ontario, but the capital for the whole of Canada is actually in Ottawa. And this is the building right here. It is the 4th largest library in the world. And much like the National Archives in Kew and the National Records of Scotland, it is, or sorry, the National Library of Scotland, it is not a lending library. It is in fact a deposit library. So anytime anything is produced here in Canada, a copy needs to get sent to Library and Archives Canada. So, and there's a number limit on it. So for instance, if you were going to do a family history of your own family and maybe give that to 10 people, you would not need to deposit that with Library and Archives Canada. If you're making maybe 100 copies and distributing it that way, which I haven't got that far yet, then it would need to be deposited. You actually have to send 2. You have to send a copy for them to keep and a copy for them to circulate among the libraries in Canada. So the mandate is to preserve the documentary heritage of Canada for the benefit of present and future generations. It actually started out that it was holding all of the government documents, and then it kind of expanded from there. It is to be a source of enduring knowledge accessible to all, contributing to the cultural, social, and economic advancement of Canada as a free and democratic society. Which sounds very wordy, but basically that's where you go if you want anything that's been, that is of record for Canada. Now remember, because it's the National Archives, it's federal information that they're holding on to. It's to facilitate in Canada cooperation among communities involved in the acquisition, preservation, and diffusion of knowledge, which again, you know, honestly, a lawyer has written this. It's to serve as a continuing memory of the Government of Canada and its institutions. And for me, that's really what it's all about, is number 1 and number 4 is to preserve the documentary heritage of Canada for future generations and to serve as a continuing memory for Canada. So some facts. It's a deposit library. It started out with the records for the Canadian government. That's all branches of the Canadian government. It is a private archive. It holds private archives. So people are welcome to donate their archives there if it is of sort of a federal or a national interest. So anybody from the arts certainly would be welcome to deposit theirs there. I'm not sure they would really want mine. Mine would be better suited to go to the provincial archives, and we'll talk about those towards the end. There are 20 million books on deposit with the Library and Archives Canada, 24 million photographs, more than a petabyte of digital content. So I don't even know what a petabyte is, but it looks like it's huge. Most of us are used to terabytes, and a petabyte is way bigger than that. So it does have quite a bit. And they have been, it's sort of been ongoing really for at least a decade now for Library and Archives Canada to digitize what they have and to make that freely available. And I know that there was, so one of the things that they have, for instance, is the military records. So the attestation papers for World War I. Now they hold all the records for World War II as well, but because of privacy, those are not readily available. And I know that the censuses are all available there, and we'll see that in a few seconds. Ancestry wanted to obviously get Canada's documents online so that, you know, to round out its own collection. And there was a big kerfuffle because people were saying, well, why would I go, as a Canadian, why would I go to Ancestry and pay a subscription to see things that are free on Library and Archives Canada? So the agreement at the time, and I don't know if it's still true or not, the agreement at the time was that Canadians would be able to access the same records they can access on Library and Archives Canada. They could access those at Ancestry. So the trick is you had to have a your IP address, which is your internet provider address, had to be Canadian. So we have Canadians, and it's not uncommon at all. It's actually quite a huge thing here that sort of the end of October, beginning of November, they go south. And I honestly, I don't blame them. You don't want those polar vortexes if you can avoid them. And as you get older, you get crankier about nasty weather. So a lot of them go south and they're there for 5 months. And they couldn't do any research because if they were in Florida or they were in Texas or they were in Mexico, they weren't able to access this for free. So I'm really not sure how that works now, but it certainly was an issue at the time. This is their web address, and I believe I have that for you in the handout. I hope the handout was circulated to you. If not, if you didn't get the handout, please feel free to email me, and I am more than happy to send that to you. So it's not an issue if you didn't get it. But just over 1% of the Library and Archives Canada holdings have been digitized and are available on the LAC website, which means that 99% of what they have is original documents, hard copy documents. So we are actually, I'm going to just pause this for half a second and we are going to go and see if we can get onto Library and Archives Canada. So this is it right here. Oops, I'm not even up there yet. Okay, so this is the website for Library and Archives Canada. You can see here that, you know, they've got their COVID notice that nobody can go in, and that's fine. And one of the things that strikes me off the bat with the Library and Archives Canada website is how busy it is. You know, you have to have a little bit of ADD to be able to kind of follow all the stuff that's on here. I find it completely overwhelming. So I am very careful about how I go about using this website. And it is one of my favorite websites. It's not my very favorite. I'll talk about that one next, but it is certainly one of my very favorites. And really everything is just right here, okay? You're going to ignore services and programs because that's completely irrelevant to family history research. And you're going to ignore services for the public because that's completely irrelevant too. You're either going to want to do discover the collection or search the collection. Regardless of which way you go, you will wind up at the same database. I tend to prefer search the collection. All right, so it's really dead easy. And if you go down here to where it says genealogy and family history, maybe, it really just tells you how to go about researching your family history. It's not actually, yeah, there you go. So how to begin the databases. So this is really if you're new to genealogy research, that's where you want to go. Other than that, then you're going to want to completely ignore that as well. And I just want to show you quickly that, you know, I'm not talking out of both sides of my head. If you look here, we were on the home page, discover the collection and search the collection are the same because this is the one I used and yet it comes up to the exact same place, okay? I have been known to make things up from time to time. This isn't one of them, however. So some of the things that are on there, I think we're actually going to go browse by A to Z. And this is really, you can go through the entire alphabet, sort of anything that you can think of that has to do with genealogy will be on here if it's at a federal level, okay? So this is new. This is 100 stories of Canadians who served in the First World War. They have, it took them a while, but they did manage to go through and digitize all of the World War I records. And it wasn't just the attestation papers anymore. Those had been readily available for quite some time. But now you can get the entire service file, which is really good. I had to wait, of course, because my ancestors that were Canadian, that fought in the Canadian war were actually my husband's, and our last name being Woodcock, you know, they did it alphabetically, of course. I used to like it much better in my daughter's grade 1 class when everything went alphabetically, but it went by first name. So again, there's lots of stuff here, and then personnel records of the First World War. Okay, you can get those as well. It tells you what's included in them. It gives you the source citation. So if you're putting this into a genealogy software, or you're keeping notes or whatever, this is where you're going to do that. So it's the RG21 is the Canadian Expeditionary Force. Volunteers who were rejected, non-permanent active militia, just a whole pile of stuff is in there. So certainly feel free to browse that if you're interested in the military history. We'll go back here again. So some of the things that you're really going to want to look at in terms of genealogy are going to be the census records. So those are federal. And they have split up in 1825 and 1831 of Upper Canada, or sorry, that's Lower Canada. They have Upper Canada, Lower Canada, Canada East, and Canada West, which can be incredibly confusing. So Lower Canada is Quebec, even though most of us who look at a map would think it's upper, it's actually Lower Canada. And the other one is Upper Canada, which is Ontario. Canada East and Canada West. West is, I think it'll be later. So yeah, it's 1842, and that was after the railway and things started to open up. You've got census records, and the ones that most people use, of course, are the federal censuses of 1871, 1881, 91, and 01. And in this one, it's interesting to me, one of the talks that I do is on Métis ancestry. So let's see if I can do this. Nope, that's not what I wanted. The internet's so slow, all the kids back to online learning right now with COVID. When you get to the census records, there are a number of columns at the top. So here we, oh, this was in British Columbia, so this actually isn't her, but it doesn't matter because we're going to look at this anyway. Let's look at the JPEG image. And if I scroll up here, the one that really interests me, so I do a talk on Hudson's Bay for the Hudson's Bay Company. There are a lot of English and Scottish officers. The company was based out of London. It was our first department store, really. It was our first trading post. And, you know, the department store still stands today 100 and, well, I guess 300 years later. And when they signed up, a lot of men from Orkney came. And when they signed up, they were here for a 3-year or 5-year tenure. They weren't allowed to have women. There were no women that were employed by the Hudson's Bay Company, including officers, and men were not allowed to bring their families. So they were here for 3 to 5 years. Often they coupled with the Native women. Many of those were Cree, and that really gave rise to the Métis Nation, which is it's a standalone ethnicity here in Canada. We have First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. And in the 1901 census, for people who are looking for their Métis ancestor, you can see here in column 5, and this is all going to be W just because that's the one I picked. Let me see. Yeah, so in here they're all W, which means white. But the other one that's in here is R, and that means red, and that means Indian, which is horrible to say. In today's, I mean, obviously it was the wording that they used at the time. But if there's an R in there, your ancestor was in there and they are male or female, and there's an R in column 5, you know that they have Native status and Native genealogy. And so you can go ahead and do some further research there. But you can see the other topics here that are included. So we'll just go left to right here. It's the dwelling and house number, the family or household, name of each person, their sex, their color, so that's column 5, relationship to the head of the household, whether they're single, married, divorced, or widowed, the month and date of their birth, the year of their birth, their age at their last birthday, the country or place of birth. That's always good. Now, the unfortunate thing is, if you find that in Canada, if we're Canadian and we go and find this, and it says, as it does in the second one there, England, or the first one there where it says United States, it doesn't say exactly where. And so that, that's really for people here who have Scottish ancestry and are trying to work backwards. That's the glitch for them, right? Because it says Scotland, but it never tells you where exactly. They have the year of immigration to Canada, the year of naturalization. Anyone who was a Brit to begin with, so if they came out from England or Scotland or Wales, they did not have to apply for naturalization. It was granted automatically. Their racial or tribal origin, their nationality, their religion, their profession, who was the wage earner, education and language. Like, there's just a ton of information on our census records. So you really, really can, you can almost build an entire story just from looking at the census records in Canada. I just lost that. So come back to that. So as I said, they do have the military records there, and that is for World War I. You can get the entire thing. For World War II, you can apply. So the way that they work it is that if your ancestor was in the Second World War and was in the Canadian Force, you can apply for that. They will go and look and figure out how many pages it's going to be, and then they will charge you to digitize those. Once they're digitized, then they're digitized and nobody else pays for that. So if you go and you pay to have your ancestor, their records digitized, and I come along 3 months later and I want the same records, I don't have to pay for those. They're just sent to me in a PDF. And I probably should say thank you, except we don't really know who that is. So. All right, so the other thing that, some of the reasons that you would want to consult this would really be for, mostly for the census, but they do have a ton of other things on here. They also have British home children, which is, we had a number of children who were sent, I think there were 100,000 were sent between 1869 and the First World War, who were in sending homes, children's homes in Scotland and England, and they were sent to Canada primarily to work on the farms. They were farm laborers, and they were either, the boys went and worked as farm laborers, the girls came and they worked as domestics. There's really a whole history there, but you can get some really good information on their stuff as well. While we're talking about the immigration, you can also find border entries. Now, this is much later, so this is if they came in the 1900s. You can get the border entry for your ancestor. I was able to follow my ancestor. Let's see what this says. So this is a border record. So this person is from Detroit, and it looks like they were going back. They were going back to Detroit. I was able to find my great uncle, my grandfather's brother, Hugh. They lived in Shotts Parish. They were sort of just outside of Airdrie. And he came over very young, and nobody really knew. Everybody knew that Uncle Hugh went to Canada. They didn't really know, or to America, sorry, and they didn't really know what happened. And it was really just by looking through these that I found him. He had come in through Port of New Brunswick, actually, and listed himself as single, even though he had 2 children at home, 2 very young children. He then made his way. I noticed on the ship's record that his cousin was with him, and he made his way across Detroit. So I knew then that he was in the States, and then I could follow him through the census records in the States to find out more about him. So long story short, but it's not really that short, Hugh left a wife and 2 children in Shotts Parish. He came to Canada in so 1922, so he was 26-ish. He said he was going to work for a coal company. He was a miner. He was going to work for a coal company in New Brunswick. The coal company didn't actually exist. He then made his way down to Detroit, where he worked. Now, the family lore was that Hugh worked for, was a butler for Mr. Ford. I can't find any record of that. He's not in any of the household schedules. But my guess is he worked for the Ford Motor Company, which is where his cousin worked. He picked up a wife there and made his way out to California and actually did very well. He was a very successful businessman. While he was out there, he owned he managed a barbershop, Turkish bath, and dry cleaning. What a combination that is. And then he wound up dead just a few years later. The coroner's report was sort of interesting because it said that it was accidental poisoning. And what had happened was that somebody, I'm thinking the second wife, poured the gin out of his gin bottle and poured cleaning fluid in, and that was actually ultimately. So that's our kind of, everybody was quite fascinated by that. You will also get in here the, let's see if we can go British Home Child. Let's do this. On the search. All right, so you get passenger lists and all sorts of other things. How did I manage that? Let's go back. All right, let's do this then. So my husband's family actually were a bit, they had more stories than we did. I mean, he was really our only story, but I had discovered in doing my husband's research that he had 4 members of his family. So his great aunt had relinquished all 4 of her children. To the first 2 were to Middlemore, and the second 2 were to Bernardo's. Very, very young, and they came out through Birmingham. So I'm just going to put these in here. There we go. And search. So here we have, these are the 4 boys. And you'll see, it doesn't matter how many times we go through, it's still the same 4 boys. So we have them, they came out, they started in 1898. So Henry and Archie came together. They were 13 and 10. Respectively. Then a couple of years later, Stephen, the third child, the youngest child, Stephen, came out. And then a year after that, Leonard came out. And these records actually are very good. Let's see if we can find. I feel, you know what, the only one that really had a good life out of all of that was Leonard. He seemed to be really settled. And interestingly enough, nobody in his was mentioned. None of his original family were mentioned in his obituary. He died here in Brantford. God, I have 0 patience, honestly. So it will tell you, as you saw before, that it will give you the ship that they came on and the year that they came on. It normally will also tell you what, there we go, that who they were coming with. So this is Stephen. You can see from this is just the index. You can see that he was male, 8 years old. He came in 1900 on the Tunisian. Date of departure, port of departure, date of arrival, port of arrival. He was with Bernardo's. Destination was Toronto. Came with 101 boys. And then there's a microfilm where you can get the same information, really. And then there's a thing here where you can see what other children were traveling together. You can go in there and get that info. So this is all the kids, the 101 kids that came on the same boat with little Stephen. 8 years old, I can't imagine. And you know, he actually, it was a bit of a sad story. He's went to be worked on farms, and he was all over Canada. He was started out in Toronto, I believe. Then he went to Nova Scotia. He was up north in Canada, in Ontario, and then he eventually, as an adult, made his way back here. One of the things that's really very common for children who were British home, the boys who were British home children, was that they signed up for the Canadian Expeditionary Force for the First World War. It's really just a hunger to get back to their homeland, and it was an easy way for them to get back. And Stephen, like all the others, signed up to be in the Army, sorry, but he had to, when they did the medical, they discovered that he had double hernia, and he had to have that operated on and fixed before he could go into service. And the belief at the time was that that double hernia was from the hard labor that he did as a very young boy. So also on, if we look at the home children again, they have all kinds of information on here. The Home Child Guide is definitely worth having a look. And they also have the Board of Guardians records. So there was a Board of Guardians really from the Poor Law who had to get inspection reports on a regular basis. And you can get that information on Library and Archives Canada as well. The other thing that you may want to look for here are some, they had war brides who came out, the Métis research. So Métis, for anybody who has Métis ancestors, as I said, that's a First Nations, it's similar to a First Nations here. We have the First Nations communities, we have the Inuit, and we have the Métis. And when the government was kind of getting Canada together to form a dominion, to make it, for Confederation, they wanted to get back the land that they had granted to, that the Crown had granted to the Hudson's Bay Company. And in doing so, they came up with the Manitoba Act. And the Manitoba Act really just gave them, it was a way for them to sort of appease the Métis community by saying, okay, we'll give you the land. Yeah, you're right, it's yours, we'll give it to you. But they made it ridiculously difficult for them, and most of them did not, in fact, get land. But they had a document that they gave them, and it was called scrip. And so if they had, 40 acres of land, if they were entitled to 48 acres of land, they got 40 acres in scrip, or they got $40, $1 for each acre of land. And when you're looking for those records, you can find them here on the Library and Archives Canada website. Okay, so that's if you have Métis ancestors. All right, so the other one, this is probably my favorite website of all, is Canadiana. And this one, let me just go back here to the PowerPoint slide. So if for Library and Archives Canada, the records that you're going to want to check are the census records, the immigration records, which are the passenger lists and the border crossings. Passenger lists are from 1865. It wasn't until 1865 that Canada made it mandatory for the ships list to be placed on deposit for us to keep a record of them. Remember, Canada didn't become a country until 1867. So I'm sure there were documents ahead of that from sort of 1860 when steamships started bringing people in, but those weren't meant to be kept. There was no mandate to keep them until 1865. The British home children, any military, domestics and porters. So after the First World War, people, Canada wanted to, the Crown wanted Canada to be as British as possible. And so they wanted to keep it as a colony. And so they started all kinds of schemes to get people to come over here and settle it. And one of those was domestics and porters. So they lined up women and men. There was a scheme where they could get assisted passage to come over. They would have a job when they got here. The domestics, of course, working in domestic service, and the porters working on the trains. And so you can find information about your ancestors if that's what brought them out. If you have ancestors who were with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, or who were with the predecessor of that, which is the Northwest Mounted Police, the records for them are also on Library and Archives Canada. Again, because they were a federal police force. And again, the Métis script. So Canadiana Online is my favorite. It's dedicated to providing access to Canada's documentary history. Again, it contains 19 million pages of digitized historical publications, which include monographs, serials, and government publications. There are 41 million pages chronicling the country and its people from the 17th to the mid-20th century. The majority of the material is handwritten, and this is heritage. And so there's two websites, there's sister websites, and they are dead easy to navigate in terms of getting from one to the other. So this is Canadiana Online, and you really can just search through here. One of the first things that I started using it for were for Hudson's Bay records, but really Lord Selkirk was the one that started me. And the reason for that was that he was given the grant of land around the Red River. So he, all along the Assiniboine River, really. So in 1811, the Hudson's Bay Company was starting to struggle a bit financially, and they agreed to sell some of their land to Lord Selkirk. And he had already brought people out. He brought out people to Prince Edward Island in the early 1800s, 1803 to 1806. He made an attempt at a settlement in southern Ontario. It didn't work, although the community continued to thrive, even though he gave up on it. And then he moved his way through, because this really was the gem for him. This is what he had his eye on all along. And he managed to get this land. He created an enormous amount of difficulty between the two rival companies of the Hudson's Bay Company and their rival, the Northwest Fur Trading Company. Had a hell of a time, really, with the Northwest Company. Wound up going to court with them a million times. But he did bring people out to settle. And so he had the land. He provided it to them at a very subsidized cost, and he helped them get set up in terms of building up their community. A lot of when he made the deal with the Hudson's Bay Company, the deal was that the men who came over to settle would also work for the Hudson's Bay Company. They would be tenured to them for 3 years. So it was a little bit of a win-win, because he got the settlers that he wanted to develop the land, and the HBC got manpower. And so that worked out really well for them. So all of the information that I could ever want about Lord Selkirk is on here. So if you have anybody who worked for the Hudson's Bay Company and received land from either the Hudson's Bay Company or Lord Selkirk, this is the website that you are definitely going to want to have a look at. But as I said, it's not the only thing. They have his papers are on here. The HBC land settlement records are on here. They have just quite a bit. Really anything that you can consider. The other thing that they have, which is sort of interesting to me, is they have records of some of the census records as well, and they have information about the British Home Children as well with the Board of Guardians. They have a lot of magazines on here. So they have the magazines for the Hudson's Bay Company. They have the magazine for the military. It was called the Beaver Magazine, and it was the military demobilization. So anybody who was sort of at the end of their military service, if a regiment was being disbanded, then they were in this magazine. And they also had the Canadian Military Gazette. So if you have an ancestor who was in the military in Canada, you can have a browse through them and see if your ancestor wound up being there. If not, then at the very least, you'll be able to find out what the was up to. And you can see over here where it says Heritage. So this is the sister site. And it's that simple, right? So here we are on Heritage. And they have a ton of information. They have most of this is digitized, it's digitized, but still on microfilm. So they have the parish registers for Newfoundland and Labrador. They have British Columbia shipping registers, Chinese immigration, census returns for Canada West, pension records, militia, just a ton of documents in here. They have a lot of shipping lists in here that you won't find on Library and Archives Canada. So it is certainly worth a look to see if your ancestor made it into Heritage, into their database in there. And if you look on the left, you can get these documents in French, which is also our other national language, or you can get them in Russian. Go figure. I wouldn't have said there were that many Russians in Canada, but there must be in order for them to think that this was important enough to do. Now, where's my screen share again? Okay, so people had quite a few emails today asking about specific cases in their family. Birth, marriage, and death are provincial jurisdictions. So those are with the local province. Depending on the time of year, or sorry, the date, time of year, so if I had, depending on the date, it will determine whether they have been sent off to the provincial archives or whether they are still retained by the Office of Vital Statistics for that province. If they are with the archives, they're freely accessible, not necessarily available online, but they are freely accessible. And otherwise, you would have to prove your relationship to the person and apply to the Vital Statistics Office for the province. There are a listing of those in the handout for all of the various websites, or the various provincial websites. So you can certainly click on those and you will be able to find those. A couple of other websites that I wanted to draw your attention to. This one is called Island Register. And I used this extensively when I was doing some research for, actually I was putting a family history book together for a family who came out as Selkirk settlers in 1806. And they took up land in Prince Edward Island. So the Island Register it's a free website, and it's to do with Prince Edward Island genealogy. On that website, they have the land records. So they will, Prince Edward Island was divided up into a series of lots. And I want to say there were 90, but I may have just made that number up. There was a lot of them anyway. And so they were divided up. And initially they were supposed to have been given out to the landed gentry and friends of whoever it was that started this. But they wound up being absentee landlords. And so what they did was then they opened it up to speculators, really. And so the land they're all divided into lots, and each lot would then have its own community. So if you're looking for your ancestor in Prince Edward Island, it would say, for instance, that they were on lot 72 or they were on lot 61 or whatever. And that would be the community basically that they lived in. They would get a little plot of that entire lot. So generally, I mean, I know out west, the lots were 20,000 acres and the average person had maybe 150 to 200. So you can see how that gets divided down a bit more. They have a ship's database as well for people who came in through Prince Edward Island and stayed there for a time. That's also on Island Register. And they have a number of records on Prince Edward Island families, sort of the first families that settled in Prince Edward Island. And I believe they also have some cemetery records. They have some cemetery records in there as well. It really is a lot of really, really good information. And as I say, it's free, so it's definitely worth having a look at. There's also, it wasn't through this website. It was through, I think, the Prince Edward Island Historical Society. There's a fabulous book. It's called The Glenaladale Settlers. And that was the group that came out in 1792 and settled. They were Catholic Highlanders that came out and they settled there. And it's a fabulous book. It's called Glenaladale. And it is really a genealogy of those families that came. You know, they will tell you who they married, which lot they lived on, who they married, who their children were, how they were connected. It's a fabulous, fabulous resource. And I believe it's available through the Prince Edward Island Historical Society. It's definitely worth a look. And it's interesting because the following year, the Hector came out from basically the same area, but they came into Nova Scotia. And that seems to be Canada's Mayflower. And that's the one, that was the start of the masses of Scots coming to Canada. No, it wasn't, because people were already here before that. And I remember I had a Highland tour a number of years ago now. And we were in, I think we were down at Urquhart Castle, actually. We'd taken kind of a day and gone and done some stuff. And there was a man there who was directly connected several generations back to the Grant that owned Urquhart Castle. He was able to verify that when he went to the Highland Archive Service in Inverness. But we were chatting, and his family have been in Nova Scotia forever. And I love the East Coast people. I love the East Coast people. Honestly, they are the Newfoundlanders and the Nova Scotians and the Prince Edward Islanders are my people. They are fabulous people, just so easygoing, great sense of humor. And And so I said to John, did your family come over on the Hector? And he said, no, no. He said, my family were here. They went down and tied that ship up. Okay, another one that you're going to want to have a look at, again, is free, is the Manitoba Archives. This is the Provincial Archives for Manitoba. This picture is a stock image. It's not actually the Manitoba Archives. Oh, how did I do that? There we go. Oh, good grief. Okay, so is the Manitoba Archives. And again, this is where you will find the information for the birth, marriage, and death for Manitoba, if in fact your ancestor lived in Manitoba. But it is also where you will find all of the papers for the Hudson's Bay Company. Even though it was a London-based company, and then later bought out the Northwest Trading Company and absorbed those records, all of the records are in fact from, for crying out loud, are on deposit there. So that's where you will find them, is at the Manitoba Archives. So that's about me. I've blathered on long enough, I think. And if you would like to take some questions, I'm more than happy. Oh, look at this. Okay, just give me half a second here. I just want to go in here. I just need to look for somebody on the. Okay, so let's have some questions. So divorces in 1917 to 1919, Sandra, those are going to be with they should at this point be with the archives for the province where your ancestor lived. So if they were in Ontario, it would be the Ontario Archives. If they were in Nova Scotia, it would be the Nova Scotia Archives. If they were in Manitoba, it will be with the Manitoba Archives. Those should have elevated at this point to be there. And you can certainly contact them. Once you get on, again, in the handout, there's a website link that will take you directly there. And you can contact them from there, send them an email, whatever it is you want. And they will be able to help you from there. Just a word, of course, that we're living in pandemic hell right now and everything is closed. I do believe that most of the archives have skeleton staff going in right now, but I'm just not sure how quickly they would be able to respond. So don't get discouraged if that doesn't happen right away. Second great grandmother, second two times grandmother born in 1869 in Toronto, Ontario, but can't find anything. So again, Anthony, you're going to want to contact the Ontario Archives or Archives Ontario. Just put into Google Ontario Archives and you will come up with that. If you don't find it there, certainly there's a link to that on the handout. And again, if you didn't get the handout, please feel free just to email me. I'm more than happy to send that out to you. And I would start there. Actually what I would do is I would find her on the 1871 census, which is on Library and Archives Canada. You would want to find her on the Library and Archives Canada website, and that will help you figure out where in fact she was living, and then go to the Toronto Archives and let them know exactly where in what her address was in Toronto, and you can get all that information from them. Searching at the LAC, I assume you should find the specific records series to put your search in, not just the homepage. No, you can go ahead and just put in whatever keywords you want and come up with that. What I failed to mention, and I believe it might be in the handout, is that they have some really good finding aids and guides. And so by all means, have a look at those, and that will help you to narrow down what it is you're looking for. But no, you should be able just to, you don't have to have the series, the RG number at all. If you do, it helps, but you don't have to. Specific books or genealogies about Scottish immigrants to Canada. There are a ton of them, and it really depends, Rebecca, on where your ancestor came. Lucille Campy is fabulous for, she has now documented, she started out with doing the Scots that came into the Maritimes. She's done the English, and I believe her latest is the Irish, or the other way around, I forget. So I would look for just really a Google search on Lucille Campy. I think you do come up with her website, but you can also come up with the books that she's written. There are a number of them. I want to say close to a dozen. Those should be available on Amazon. So Amazon Canada, Amazon.com, which is the US, or Amazon UK, because she is living in England. And if not, then contact me and I will send you another place where you can purchase those. She has just really, really good information on there. I use her books all the time. David Dodson did have some. I don't know if they're specific to Canada. I know he did quite a few from, but his was really just an index. And, you know, it kind of boggles my mind trying to go through his because it's like going through a telephone book. Royal Canadian Mounted Police records, yeah, good question. 1869, I think, is when they switched up to being the RCMP. I think before that, they were the Northwest Mounted Police. But again, those records will be available, Linda, on Library and Archives Canada, so you can have a look there. And there will be every record set that you want to consult on Library and Archives Canada and on the other the other two websites, Heritage and Canadiana. It's very similar to going into the National Records of Scotland. They do have some really good sort of brief information telling you why the records were there, what they cover, and you know how to access them. So those dates will be in there for sure. The latest dates of records. It depends on what it is you're looking for. Censuses, I think it's 1911 is the most recent one. 1921 might, if it's not out, it might be out soon. I think it was 92 years. And then it just depends on, you know, it's similar privacy things in terms of 100 years for birth and 75 and 50. Trying to find wedding records for 1865 in Ontario, wedding records. So the marriage record, if there is one, it would be at the Ontario Archives. Yeah, so I would check, so this is Joan, trying to find a wedding record for 1865 in Ontario. Finds a second marriage for the bride in 1869. It refers to the first husband's name. So yeah, in 1869, I would, for Ontario, you're going to want to go to Ontario Archives website and see in there. At the very least, you'll get an index or a reference number. And again, you probably have to contact them. So the provincial archives generally have somebody who will help and do research for you. You don't need to have a genealogist go and do that. Federal, you have to have somebody go in. They don't have the time to do that. And my grandfather was a sea captain employed by Imperial Oil in BC. Is there somewhere I would be able to see his sailing career? Good question. I would check, Val, with the provincial archives in British Columbia. And you might want to just do a Google search, a quick Google search on Imperial Oil Archives and see where those are on deposit. But yeah, I would check with the BC Archives, because the other thing is if they don't have them, they could probably tell you where those are. That's fascinating. I would love to have an ancestor who did that. Okay, there's a couple of people who have raised their hands. Unfortunately, I can't do anything about a raised hand, but if you want to type your question in, I am more than happy to answer that. And apart from that, I will say hello to Eddie.
Hello there, Christine.
How are you?
On behalf of Glasgow and West of Scotland family history members, I'd like to thank you for your presentation this evening, making us aware of the free Canadian research websites. I'm sure during this period of lockdown, our members will be making use of these facilities. I'd also like to thank you for answering our questions and for the handout. Many, many thanks.
You're most welcome. Most welcome. I hope it's been helpful. Again, if you have questions that I didn't get a chance to get to, go ahead and send me those questions. Oh, look, some people have put them here in the chat box, so let's try that.
No, I'm okay, thanks.
Most people are just saying hello, but I think I'll just come down here. Nope. Personnel covered in the what personnel are covered in the 1812 war pension records? Yeah, there's a good question. I have to say, James, that's not an area of expertise for me. I do know that, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I know that there are some Canadians on this watching with me. If any of you know the answer to that, do you want to pop that in? Sorry, I wish I could be more help. It's just not my records of British troops serving in Canada and Montreal. So All of the military records are with Library and Archives Canada. I'm guessing that's where the World War II, 1812 pension records are as well. But the other part of that is there's a local church in Montreal. They may have placed their records on deposit with the Quebec, the archives in Quebec. If not, and then if the church still stands, I would certainly drop them an email. I wouldn't have any hesitation about doing that at all. A funny story, which isn't really, but you know, Scots are known for that, right? It's like the Irish. I sent away for my dad's baptismal record. At one point we had that, and I don't know what happened to it. So I sent away for my dad's baptismal record. He was from Rosewell. And it was forever getting the answer back. I'd actually forgotten I sent it. And it came back, and this woman had actually been a girlfriend of my dad's way back when, and got all kinds of information on him and photographs and everything. It was wonderful. So it's definitely worth getting in touch with the local people. Right, I think that's us. So if it's okay with you, Eddie, I think we'll end her off there. I will send you a link to the recording of this, and you can then circulate that to anybody who wants to watch it after today.
Will do.
All right. Right, thank you. Bye.
Bye.